Welcome back to CSS Breakdown, Book by Book, Season 4. In this episode, we dive into one of the most profound meditations in Will Durant's Fallen Leaves, an exploration of what it means to exist, to be conscious, and to wonder about the soul. We're going to navigate Durant's deeply personal, yet rigorously thoughtful final reflections, drawing from his incredible insights as he grapples with life's biggest questions.
It's a truly fascinating journey, isn't it? Durant isn't just presenting philosophical ideas in some, dry academic way. He's really grappling with the very fabric of being, consciousness, and that enduring human question of what, if anything, truly remains after we are gone.
Right.
So our mission today really is to unpack his definitions, which are surprisingly precise, and follow the compelling thread of his arguments, and ultimately explore his conclusions about the soul, free will, and the nature of reality as he saw it in his later years.
That really does set a compelling stage.
Yeah.
And given how, personal and existential Durant's opening is, it makes perfect sense that he would then immediately pivot to defining his terms, getting that foundation right before tackling those huge questions.
Exactly. You need that groundwork.
So what we're going to do for you is walk through his remarkably concise, yet, profound approach to defining these fundamental concepts, things like matter, mind, consciousness, and then moving beyond that to the soul itself. And we'll see how these foundational definitions lead him to some, frankly, surprising departures from other great thinkers you might know. So, let's unpack this. Okay, so Section 1, the human longing and the challenge of definition. Durant kicks this meditation off in Fallen Leaves with this really powerful image. Steeples. He describes them as being, everywhere, constantly pointing upward, almost like they're defying despair, lifting hope. Doesn't matter if they're lofty city spires or just simple chapels out in the hills. He sees them rising up everywhere from earth towards the sky.
In every village, every nation.
Exactly. And for Durant, these steeples, they represent a universal challenge to doubt, an invitation maybe to consolation for weary hearts. He sees them as this testament to an innate human striving, this persistent whisper of something more, something beyond the immediate tangible world we see every day.
That's a really profound observation, isn't it? And what's striking is how he immediately frames the fundamental question that these steeples represent for all of us. He asks, is it all a vain delusion? Is there nothing beyond life but death, and nothing beyond death but decay?
Heavy questions right out of the gate.
Right. And he doesn't shy away from the uncertainty. He immediately acknowledges with this real honesty, we cannot know. But crucially, this isn't him dismissing it. He says quite pointedly, as long as men suffer, those steeples will remain. It sets this deeply human, almost spiritual tone for what follows. It anchors his whole inquiry not in abstract theory, but in the very real experience of being human. Our perpetual yearning for meaning, our inescapable confrontation with suffering. It's a sort of pragmatic acceptance of our need for hope, even when we don't have all the answers.
And that leads directly, almost seamlessly, into the core purpose of this whole meditation, doesn't it? Which is to examine whether anything of us, any part of our essence, our identity, survives the apparent finality of our existence.
The big question.
The biggest. And he makes it clear, to even start thinking about this, you need clear definitions. And here's where he offers this delightful kind of humorous jab at Kant.
Right, Kant's 800 pages.
Exactly. He notes Kant took a staggering 800 pages just for definitions in his critiques, but Durant Riley observes, my mind is not as complex as his, so he'll manage with far less. I think for anyone listening who's ever felt overwhelmed by dense philosophy, that's a real aha moment, right?
Totally relatable. Kant's definitions were so meticulous, almost architectural, building this vast system, categories of understanding, forms of intuition, his whole transcendental idealism thing.
It's a lot.
And Durant's humor just highlights his own approach. Pragmatic, accessible. He's basically saying, look, I'm going to get to the point and it's going to make sense. No 800 pages needed here.
Okay, Section 2, laying the groundwork, defining existence. So with that wonderfully direct opening, Durant gets right down to business. He needs that solid platform before he gets into the really abstract stuff.
Yeah.
Let's dive into his definitions, starting with the most tangible things. He begins very simply, but profoundly defining matter, just that which occupies space.
It sounds incredibly simple, doesn't it? Matter is that which occupies space. But for Durant, this is actually exactly, and he calls that reduction a form of mysticism. He's basically accusing science of, veering into its own kind of dogma.
Interesting take.
The key insight here is Durant's unwavering commitment to empirical observation. to common human experience as the basis for understanding reality. Even when it diverges from these increasingly abstract scientific models, for anyone grappling with, say, quantum mechanics today, Durant offers this grounding, almost intuitive counter. Look, I still see objects occupying space, I believe they exist independently, and that's enough for me.
And he emphasizes that common sense confirmation, right?
Yeah.
Saying it's confirmed by 1,000,000 experiments and 1 billion fellow men, which is enough.
Yeah.
It's very pragmatic, almost democratic, this approach to truth, relying on shared experience.
But he's not naive about it.
No, exactly. He's nuanced enough to acknowledge that critical distinction. The object isn't known to him exactly as it is independently. He gets that our perception changes it. It's influenced by the structure and condition of my senses, the intervening medium, even the light falling on it.
Right, the subjective filter is always there.
So he's aware of that filter.
Yeah.
He's not falling into some simplistic realism, but he's still absolutely upholding objective existence.
So the big question for him then is, how does he resolve this tension? Objective existence, subjective perception. How does he square that circle? And he famously brings in Samuel Johnson's brusque way of disproving idealism.
Kicking the stone.
Kicking the stone. Yeah, Johnson responding to Bishop Berkeley's idea, esse es percipit, is to be perceived. Berkeley thought the tree only exists if someone sees it.
A mind-bending idea.
Totally. And Johnson just walks up, kicks a big stone hard, and says, I refute it thus. It's just this wonderfully concrete, memorable example, cuts right through the abstract debate, makes it incredibly relatable.
It sticks with you.
It really does. And it perfectly encapsulates Durant's practical, no-nonsense approach. Our perceptions might filter reality, but they don't just create it out of thin air.
Okay, so moving beyond matter, he tackles space. And he defines it both subjectively and objectively, like he did with matter. Subjectively, space is the coexistence of perceptions. So like seeing two things at once, one relative to the other. One's to the left, one's above.
How we map things out mentally.
Right, building that coherent spatial map in our minds from sensory input. But then, objectively, he says space is the possibility and medium of motion. Without space, there's literally no room for anything to move or change position. Imagine a universe with no distance. Nothing could happen.
It's a stage, essentially.
Exactly. Objective space provides the stage for all physical reality to unfold.
And time follows a remarkably similar pattern, maintaining that dual perspective. Subjectively, he explains time as the conscious sequence of perceptions one after the other. That's our internal feeling of events unfolding, the before and after, in our thoughts and observations.
Our inner timeline.
Precisely. But objectively, he argues, time is simply the possibility of change. And he uses these wonderfully vivid examples. The trees will grow and wither whether I perceive them or not. Seasons will succeed one another whether or not there is an eye to watch their procession.
And dying trees may fall even if no ear is near to hear their crash. Yeah, I remember that.
It emphasizes that these processes just happen regardless of us. Time is inherent to the universe, not just a construct of our minds. It's a subtle point, but crucial for grounding his whole worldview in a reality independent of human consciousness.
And this careful groundwork defining matter, space, time as objectively existing, independent of us, this leads him straight to rejecting Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer's famous idealist idea that the world is my idea.
Yeah, Durant's having none of that.
Not at all. He asserts with total clarity, it is a stern reality of which you and I are passing spawns. And this clarity, this firm grounding in a tangible, independent reality is what allows him to then move confidently into exploring the immaterial stuff. Mind, soul. He needed that solid foundation first. He built his philosophical house on rock, not sand.
Makes sense. You need that before you can talk about things you can't kick like a stone.
Exactly. So section 3, the inner world, mind, self, and consciousness. Having established matter as something that takes up space, Durant then makes this crucial logical leap. Based on his own direct and repeated introspection, he concludes that mind is immaterial. Why? Because it gives no sign of occupying space.
Right. You can't measure a thought's volume.
You can't point to a spot in your head and say, that's where my idea about dinner is. It's fundamentally different from a physical object.
And this is a pivotal distinction in his whole philosophy. It separates the physical from the mental very directly. He illustrates it beautifully, saying, the mind embraces a mile with no more effort than in contemplating an inch.
Oh, that's a great line.
Isn't it? It highlights that the content of the mind isn't bound by spatial dimensions. A thought about the Andromeda Galaxy takes up no more physical space in your head than a thought about a grain of sand. For him, This immateriality is a direct observation, and he defines mind quite comprehensively as the totality of perceptions, memories, and ideas in an organism, sometimes with consciousness thereof.
So it covers everything mental, aware, or not.
Pretty much, from raw sensation to complex ideas.
And he then breaks down sensation itself, defines it as the feeling of an external stimulus or an internal condition. What's interesting is his point that sensation can be unconscious, but still cause a reaction, like a reflex.
The foot tickle example.
Right. Tickle a sleeping foot, the toes curl up automatically, no conscious awareness needed. It shows our bodies react even when our minds aren't, fully online. But a conscious sensation, he notes, always comes with introspection, the inner awareness of the feeling itself.
It's the difference between your pupil reacting to light and you actually seeing the light.
Exactly, that awareness layer.
And here's where it gets particularly compelling, I think. He tackles this major philosophical challenge head-on. He pushes back quite firmly against the empiricist David Hume.
Hume, right, who said the mind is just a stream of perceptions.
Precisely. Hume famously argued there's no continuous unifying self, just a succession of mental states passing through, like actors on a stage with no actual stage. Radical skepticism.
Yeah, makes your head spin a bit.
It does. But Durant argues, based on what he calls the direct witness of introspection, that besides this stream of states, there's undeniably a sense of continuity and personality constituting the self. It's that consistent I that feels like it persists through all the changing thoughts and feelings, the you that recognizes yourself and memories from years ago.
The thread that runs through it all.
Exactly. For Durant, that continuity isn't an illusion, it's a fundamental internal reality we directly experience.
That makes a lot more intuitive sense, I have to say. And then there's consciousness itself. He describes it as the quality distinguishing waking from sleeping and perception from memory, that vivid present awareness, that undeniable feeling of subjective being.
The what it's like aspect.
Right. And Durant highlights that this has been a thorn in the metaphysics of every materialist. And you can see why, can't you, if you try to reduce everything, all mental stuff, just to physical processes firing neurons, chemical reactions. How do you account for that subjective experience, that feeling of being aware?
The hard problem of consciousness, as philosophers call it now. Materialists often try to explain it away, maybe as an epiphenomenon, a byproduct with no real power, or even just an illusion.
But for Durant, it feels like this fundamental challenge, a direct experiential counter-argument to a purely physicalist view. It really makes you stop and think, what is consciousness if it's not just a physical thing?
And building on this, Durant actually anticipates some ideas from psychoanalysis, which talks a lot about the subconscious mind. But he prefers his own term, the physiological self, which I think is quite insightful.
Physiological self. Why that term?
Well, it's not just a semantic difference. It roots this deeper layer firmly in the body itself. He describes it as the storing in our nervous system of past, even prenatal, even racial, sensations, actions, desires, and fears. Think of it like this deep, embodied archives of everything that shaped us, consciously or not. It's the instinct that pulls your hand from the stove before you even think.
Or maybe a deep-seated fear you can't quite place.
Exactly. An experience you don't consciously recall, but it still influences how you act. This physiological self is like the wellspring of our unexamined impulses and ingrained patterns.
And these dormant memories, they aren't just locked away, they can surface.
Right. They can actively enter our dreams, he says, especially when there is no waking conscious self to check past memory with present perception. The subconscious gets free rein then, and they can also pop into our waking consciousness when some present experience arouses a related memory stored in the nerves, like a smell triggering a childhood memory out of the blue.
Ah, yeah, that happening.
It's this dynamic interaction between the conscious mind and this deeper physiological layer.
Okay, so it's all interconnected.
And this leads him to a crucial clarification. He states that these dormant recollections, this physiological self, are part of the self and the soul. This really expands our understanding. The soul isn't just our conscious thought. It's much broader, deeper.
So consciousness isn't the whole story for the soul.
Not at all. He asserts consciousness is not all of the soul, but only the soul's supreme achievement. This refines what he means by soul. It's not just awareness, it's this broader, vital, animating principle. Consciousness is its most developed expression, the peak of its abilities. Like, the bloom is the flower's supreme achievement, but the flower is also the stem, the roots, the whole thing working together.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, Section 4, the essence of being defining the soul. So having laid out matter, space, time, mind, consciousness, where does this all lead for his understanding of the soul itself? He offers this really profound, very active definition. He defines the soul as distinct from the mind you.
Important distinction.
Right. As an inner directive and energizing force in everybody and in every cell and organ of a body. It's not passive. It's dynamic, guiding, and inherent vitality.
And he notes its deep historical link to breath, doesn't he? The ancient term spiritus, where we get spirit, meant both soul and breath.
Highlighting that fundamental connection to life itself.
Exactly. It speaks to that primal understanding. Breath is life. And while he accepts the soul gradually dies if breathing stops permanently, he stresses it's more than respiration. It can rise from mere breathing to the subtlest functions of the body or the mind. So it covers everything from basic biological processes, growth, healing, to the highest forms of thought, creativity, even spiritual yearning.
It's the underlying animating principle unifying everything.
That's a good way to put it.
And when he introspects, looks inward, he says he perceives not just sensations and ideas, but also desire, will, ambition, and pride as vital phases of me. This is where it gets really personal for him, doesn't it? It connects directly to the driving forces of his own existence. It's not abstract, it's lived reality, the inner springs of action.
Which raises that important question, what is it that truly drives us as humans? And Durant draws heavily here from Spinoza. He echoes Spinoza's powerful Latin phrase, desiderium ipsa essentia hominis.
Which means
The desire is the very essence of man. For Durant, we aren't just passive observers or rational machines. He sees us as living flames of desire until we admit final defeat.
wow, living flames of desire.
Powerful imagery, right. It suggests our desires aren't just fleeting wants, but the fundamental wellspring of our being. They propel us, shape our actions, give life meaning. It recognizes those powerful, often unconscious forces animating us.
And building on that, he defines will. How does that fit in?
He sees will as desire expressed in ideas that become actions unless impeded by contrary or substitute desires and ideas. So desire gets translated into conscious action, directed by our thoughts. Unless, of course, other desires or ideas block it or redirect it.
Like wanting that cake versus wanting to stick to the diet.
The classic internal conflict, exactly. And from this, he defines our character as the sum of our desires, fears, propensities, habits, abilities, and ideas. It's this active, dynamic, comprehensive view of what makes us who we are. A mosaic of all these internal forces constantly interacting, shaping our responses. Character isn't static. It's a living collection of impulses and learned behaviors.
Okay, so the soul is this directive force, driven by desire, shaping our character.
And he goes further. He describes this soul, or psyche, as a steaming fountain of desires and thoughts that actively forms the body and the face. Meaning, our inner drives physically shape us, though he quickly adds, limited by heredity and environment. And this is where he takes a really fascinating, kind of unconventional turn.
Yeah, this is the Lamarck part, right? This is where he diverges quite significantly from mainstream science, even then.
It's a truly audacious pivot. Durant explicitly says, I leave Darwin here and revert with cautious modifications to Lamarck. Now, for listeners, this isn't just a minor point. Darwinian evolution relies on random genetic mutation and natural selection. Lamarckian evolution, mostly discredited, proposed organisms could pass on traits acquired during their lifetime.
Like the blacksmith's muscles being passed down.
Right. And Durant is suggesting that the soul, this inner formative force driven by desire, is the very mechanism for this. That intentional shaping could influence evolution over generations. He uses the amoeba example, extending a temporary arm to clutch and enclose some wanted object, and he argues desire is molding that arm.
So the desire itself shapes the physical form.
Over time, yes. He suggests if such desires are expressed consistently over many lives and generations, this persistent directive force of the embryo may generate a permanent arm. It implies a kind of purposeful evolution, a striving that molds the physical form. That's a radical departure from the purely mechanistic view.
It really is. It puts intention back into the evolutionary picture in a way.
And this leads to maybe his most provocative extension of the idea. He echoes Spinoza again. Omnia quodammodo animata.
Meaning?
All things are in some way animated, even if it's only the dance of electrons in an apparently lifeless stone. This is close to panpsychism, the idea that consciousness or some mind-like quality is fundamental everywhere in the universe, even at the most basic levels.
So even a stone has some kind of inner life.
In a very rudimentary way, according to this view, it makes you look at everything differently, doesn't it? From particles to people potentially imbued with some animating force, some subtle inner life, it connects the micro and macro, challenging our usual idea of inert matter. A profound leap.
Okay, wow. So if everything is animated and the soul is this directive force, that leads us to Section 5, the question of freedom determinism versus spontaneity. Now, despite his clear love for Spinoza, Durant departs from him here, rejecting determinism. This feels like a major turning point, right? Especially after defining the soul as this active force.
You've hit the core conflict precisely. And his reasoning for rejecting determinism is fascinating. For determinism would make consciousness a superfluous encumbrance.
A what now? Superfluous encumbrance.
Yeah, basically an unnecessary burden. He's posing a powerful logical challenge. If everything is predetermined, why did consciousness even evolve? He doubts such a remarkable thing, with all its complexity and subjective richness, would have persisted if it had no value for survival.
Ah, the evolutionary argument.
Exactly. If every thought, every action was just the inevitable outcome of prior causes, consciousness would be like a moviegoer watching a film they can't change, redundant. Why evolve it if it does nothing?
Makes sense from that perspective.
Yeah.
So if it's not superfluous, what's its value?
He argues consciousness serves as a rehearsal stage for testing diverse possible responses to a situation. Think about it. We use our awareness to imagine outcomes, forecast results based on memory. This mental rehearsal allows us to affect our final action. It's the pause, the deliberation.
The look before you leap function.
Precisely. Delayed reaction allows time for every important aspect of a situation to enter consciousness and to arouse a reply. In this way, response can be intelligent and adequate. Without it, we'd just be reflex machines.
It's the space for choice.
That's what he's arguing. And he pushes this to an almost absurd conclusion to show how problematic he finds pure determinism. He says if consciousness had no effect, if everything was mechanical, then every line of Shakespeare's plays finds its distant cause and explanation in some gaseous primeval nebula.
Wow. So Hamlet was predetermined by the Big Bang.
According to strict determinism, yes. It strips away all agency, creativity, genius. Shakespeare becomes just a complex chemical reaction spitting out words predetermined billions of years ago. Durant finds that view harder to believe than any medieval miracle story. It defies logic and intuition more profoundly for him.
That really does put it starkly.
It forces you to confront the implications of a purely mechanical universe.
So given that, Durant puts his trust elsewhere. He talks about trusting his immediate internal perception beyond any parade of syllogisms. He's saying that direct feeling of making choices, that sense of agency, outweighs logical proofs for determinism. Lived experience trumps abstract logic.
Which raises the question, why distrust logic, especially when it seems to contradict inner experience? He points out, very shrewdly, how many things were proved by logic only to be overturned later.
Like Euclidean geometry or Newtonian physics.
Exactly. Euclidean propositions challenged by Gauss and Riemann, Newtonian physics expanded by Einstein. Logic seemed complete, but wasn't. His conclusion is really provocative. Logic itself is a human creation and may be ignored by the universe.
Oof, that's a big statement.
It is. It suggests our human frameworks, however neat, might not perfectly capture reality's deeper complexity. It's a kind of humility towards human reason, an acknowledgement of mystery.
So if pure determinism is out, what's his alternative? Where does freedom come from?
He believes there's an escape if we accept that all nature includes some power of spontaneity. This inherent, unpredictable spark exists throughout reality, he thinks, becoming more and more complex as we rise from gases to human beings.
Spontaneity everywhere, growing more complex in life.
Right. And in humans, he argues, beyond that determinist trinity, heredity, environment, circumstance, which definitely influence us, there's more. There's the expansive, driving, procreant urge of the soul.
Procreant urge, like creative.
Yeah, that inner creative drive, a force pushing for new forms, innovation, growth, he says flatly. Growth would be unintelligible without it. Without this internal spark, life would just repeat itself, never evolve or develop meaningfully. It wouldn't match the dynamic reality we observe.
So he emphasizes personal agency again. In addition to mechanical forces operating in me, there is me.
No mere machinery of sensation, memory, and response, but a force and will bearing the imprint and character of myself. It's that subjective I acting, not just reacting. He admits he doesn't know the exact modest measure of freedom he has, but introspection always reveals ambition, desire, will, those internal drivers.
And he circles back to desire being key.
Desire, not experience, is the essence of life. Experience becomes the tool of desire. It's our drive shaping reality, using experience along the way.
Okay, but here's the tricky part. If we do have freedom, How does it work in an external world that seems governed by mechanical laws? How does free will find an opening?
That's the classic challenge, isn't it? And he offers a really insightful answer. Maybe that external world may itself be no blind machine, but a scene of diverse, often conflicting vitalities and wills. Perhaps the universe isn't just a static machine, but a dynamic interplay of active forces, just like our inner world.
So the laws aren't absolute constraints.
He suggests the laws of mechanics we observe may be only the approximate average result in the large of those abounding forces. And this is where it gets really interesting because he points to physics itself moving in this direction. Science might be backing him up.
How so?
Well, he mentions Heisenberg's principle of indeterminacy in quantum mechanics, that fundamental unpredictability at the subatomic level, challenging classical determinism. He also cites Niels Bohr's idea of a duplex world, internal subjective concave and external objective convex, each with its own ways but complementary.
Two aspects of reality.
Exactly. And he connects this back to Spinoza's idea of one substance with two attributes: material extension, space, and spaceless thought. So we are these unique parts of reality that can perceive both aspects, the external form and the internal animating life. It's this amazing synthesis of ancient philosophy and modern physics.
Offering a universe where freedom and spontaneity can exist within a larger, unified but ultimately non-mechanistic reality. That's quite a picture.
It really is.
Which brings us, finally, to Section 6, the finality of self, death, and immortality. So after this whole incredible journey defining existence, mind, the spontaneous soul, we reach Durant's thoughts on death. And despite his clear affection for his own unique soul, that complex entity he defined, he states very clearly, very pragmatically, he does not expect it to survive the complete death of my body.
A stark conclusion, but honest.
Very.
And he defines death quite specifically, doesn't he, as the breakup of the human soul, i.e. of the life-giving, form-molding force of an organism into those partial souls that animate individual parts of the body. It's like the unified force deconstructs, reverts to animating the components.
He gives that slightly macabre example.
Yeah, the hair and nails continuing to grow for a bit on a corpse. It's striking, but it emphasizes the gradual disintegration, the persistence of constituent energies even after the whole is gone.
So when the body completely disintegrates, those energies persist.
He believes there will still be souls or inner energizing powers, even in the inorganic fragments that remain. Energy persists, animating even seemingly lifeless matter, like those electrons in the stone he mentioned. But his soul, as me, his unique identity, tied to his body, memories, desires, character, that must suffer disintegration as my body decays. It's a deeply personal, poignant conclusion, acknowledging the end of the individual self, even if underlying forces continue. His identity, as will Durant, ceases.
And here again, he departs from Spinoza, right?
Mm-hmm.
On immortality.
Yes, showing his intellectual independence again. He recalls Spinoza's idea of intellectual immortality, feeling immortal by grasping eternal truths, viewing things subspecie eternitatis in the perspective of eternity.
Becoming one with the divine mind.
That was the idea. Connecting with timeless truths makes your thoughts timeless, part of something eternal. He notes Santayana, another materialist, found comfort in a similar fantasy that our ideas could achieve a kind of timeless existence.
A way to find permanence beyond death.
It's a common philosophical move,
Yep.
but Durant questions it directly.
How?
He just cuts through the abstraction with this very grounded human question. Which of us has ever seen or can ever see things in the perspective of eternity? It brings this grand idea right back down to earth. It might be comforting for philosophers, he implies, but it's not a lived reality for most of us. We're stuck in time with our limited perspective. Classic Durant practicality.
So no intellectual immortality for him.
Doesn't seem like it. And he ends this whole profound meditation with this powerful, graceful acceptance of his own mortality. He echoes Caesar. Jam satis vixi.
I have already lived enough.
Exactly. A statement of contentment, completeness, a life fully lived, thoroughly examined.
And he sees death when it comes in due time after a life fully lived, not as a tragedy, but as forgivable and good, a natural, acceptable end.
And then that wonderful touch of humility and humor.
Oh yeah, if in my last gasps I say anything contrary to this bravado, pay no attention to me.
Huh, it's great, isn't it? Acknowledging human fear at the end, but sticking to his reasoned acceptance. A final, self-aware wink.
It really is.
And his absolute final thought on it all. We must make room for our children, which is just beautiful, I think.
It's more than just generations, isn't it?
Much more. It encapsulates this broader acceptance of life's continuous flow, the natural progression, the legacy of humanity beyond the individual self. It's about the greater good, the onward march, passing the torch.
Wow. Okay, what an extraordinary deep dive into Will Durant's final meditations in Fallen Leaves. He takes us from that universal human longing in the steeples through these rigorous yet clear definitions of existence, mind, soul, to a really nuanced view of free will. And finally, this deeply personal, accepting view of death. It touches on so many huge questions.
It really makes you consider that interplay, doesn't it, between our inner subjective experience and the objective world outside, and how seemingly contradictory ideas like a mechanical seeming universe and freedom, or a soul that's both a vital force and mortal, can actually fit together coherently in a broader philosophy. It challenges us, I think, to look beyond rigid categories. Appreciate the complexity, the mystery of being, seeing animation even where we thought there was none.
So what stands out to you listening to this, from Durant's whole exploration of existence, consciousness, the soul? Maybe it's his bold rejection of that intellectual immortality idea, insisting the personal soul disintegrates. Or maybe his steadfast belief in that spontaneous, procreant urge, that inner drive defying pure determinism. Or just his skill in bridging ancient thought with modern physics. We really hope this deep dive into Fallen Leaves leaves you with a renewed sense of curiosity and maybe a rich set of questions to ponder about your own existence and those animating forces within and around us.